Hello, everyone, and welcome everybody to this session about the workflow designer, this webinar. Pretty excited about this one. And my name is Mauro. I'm a product manager here at Yokoy, responsible for the workflow designer. Very excited to see many of you here participating to this session. And today with me, I have another colleague joining the session as well, running this webinar. Kelly, maybe you want to share a few details about yourself as well?
Great. Thank you so much, Mauro. Thank you for the introduction. As he said, my name is Kelly. I work as a service engagement manager in the professional services team in Yokoy, and we're really looking forward to taking you through the workflow designer and how it works in action today.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Then, without further ado, I would say we can kick it off by talking about a bit more in detail about the agenda. I'm going to be walking you through the first part of the presentation, whereas Kelly is going to take over the second part, more hands-on. I'm going to give you an overview about what is the workflow designer, why it matters for you, what is important, and why also we decided to invest resources into bringing this product innovation into Yokoy. I'm going to walk also you through some of the resources that we have available in terms of documentation that you can find, but also how you can self-serve and make sure that you are fully enabled to make use of these product. And then we're going to go into a more hands-on section of the presentation where Kelly is going to walk us through some use case that we have seen in action that you could benefit as well by using the workflow designer. And I think without further ado, we can introduce the workflow designer. And let me first start by saying that workflows is something that we've been very starting to look at the very beginning of Yokoy, right? We've been starting to appreciate how also customers make use of approval routings. And in general, the whole Yokoy platform has been designed from the very beginning to provide flexibility and control and automation to our customers to serve better at best their flows and their company policies. And this is exactly why we decided to invest into bringing a tool, i.e. the workflow designer, that would allow customers in a no code way to design their spend flow as they best prefer, putting back their control in their hands and also the flexibility. The workflow designer is one of the latest additions to our product family, and it supports both the expense and invoice module in a more platform and generalistic way. And as we will see afterwards, it's really flexible and intuitive, easy to use with drag and drop configurations, templates, and examples that are already ready to use. It is really able to support your company policies and also your business as it grows, as you may add new approvers or less, or as you may just want to increase the level of automation that you have by using these products. It brings end-to-end control, and as well, again, it puts all the effort on your end without necessarily requesting change requests or some specific engineering resources. Everything can be done and self-served in the platform in a no-code way already by you today. And following this, I want to briefly mention as well the resources that are available to you, which we have worked on in order to enable users and customers by using the workflow designer. We have already put together a very comprehensive step-by-step guide that you can find in the help center, going from getting started to troubleshooting to activating, deleting a workflow, where it explains you step by step really how you can leverage this new piece of innovation by making sure, again, that all the configurations can be readily understood and can be used by you in the very end. If that is not enough, and I think it's already a lot to digest, there are already possibilities for you to get in touch with us. Kelly's going to briefly also show that afterwards. But if you need that, you can reach out to us, to our support team, where we'll be happy to help you with a dedicated service request, some hours, some consulting hours that we have with you, or more detailed support that will be taken care of by our teams. And then before moving on to the next step, which will be the demo, the actual demo with the product, I want to briefly talk about how the workflow designer is rolled out in your specific Yokoy environment. All Yokoy customers get access to the workflow designer included at no additional cost, but more features and functionalities are available for customers on the higher plans. So the primary difference that you can see here and you can appreciate from this slide is the level of customization and flexibility that is available at each plan. Being the higher plan, the more level of flexibility that you can find in each of these various tiers. At glance, you can find what each plan contains, but for that, I refer to the documentation in the Help Center, where you can find the more detailed examples and more explanations in depth about all of these various tiers. And I think that was pretty much it from my end from this introductory part. I now leave the word to Kelly to follow up for the actual demo with a hands-on representation of how it looks like and how you can make sure to use the designer to tailor it to your company policies at best and automate more. So Kelly, over to you.
Thanks, Mauro, for taking us through the Workflow Designer. I think it was a really great introduction, and I think everyone is really excited to see the Workflow Designer in action now. So let's take you through that. Firstly, when you enter into the application and you come into the admin section, you may notice that you do not have this Workflow Designer tab. It might not be visible within the admin section, and that's because the first thing you need to do is grant yourself the correct rights. You do that by coming to Finance HR roles and selecting the user that you would like within that company to be able to create workflows, to design workflows, to edit the workflows. And then you select that specific user and you make sure that you give them the rights to the Workflow Designer by ticking the box. Once you've done that, then you can come through to the Workflow Designer tab and you can actually start to create all of the workflow designs that you would like. Just to orientate ourselves on this page, you can see that you can select the different types of workflow designers. So you can see everything that's been created and published for expenses as well as invoices if you were to choose. You can see which ones have been published and which ones might be in draft that you can still then edit. And you can also create then a new workflow. So let's jump into creating the new workflow. The first thing that you would do is you need to choose the type of workflow that we have. We have for invoice module or for the expense module, but today we're going to be taking you through the expense module. So you would select that and go over to next. The next important thing to do is to name your workflow. It's really important to give it a clear name that will be able to correspond very well to what the workflow is actually doing. Over time, you'll have many iterations of the Workflow Designer once you're using it within your company, and you want it to have a really clear naming convention. So within our example, we're going to be focusing on a project-based approval flow. So we will say project-based approval flow for this case. Okay. Great. So now it comes and brings us over here to the blank whiteboard, which is essentially your playground where you'd be able to work and design all the different workflow designs. The first thing that you want to do when you're starting with the Workflow Designer is really to start with something that already exists. It can be really challenging to start from this blank whiteboard, and we have so many resources available to you that really make it so easy to be able to get started with the Workflow Designer and to just make it much more intuitive and much faster. So there are a few options here. The first one is to click this Workflow Library button, which then takes you to our very comprehensive help center. And you can see we have some real life examples here. So we have examples for both invoice and for expense. And you can read a little bit about it. It has a very descriptive summary to each of them. And you can download them then, and then you can make changes for your company. Or what you can do, and what we'll be doing today, is you can go ahead and use this templates, which we have created the most popular, the most common templates that we find most of our customers would really benefit their organization, that it's a very popular use case. What's also really nice about all of the templates is it has a little summary, which kind of tells you what each one does. So if you have a read, you can then decide which one will fit into your company and what works well as a starting point. So for today's example, it is a German consulting firm, and they have projects that their employees would have to submit expenses against. And what they would want is that the approval takes place based on the project that the expense pertains to. So in this case, instead of the line manager or a cost object having to approve, whoever is the owner of the project that the expense relates to, that needs to be the specific approver. So you can see, that this tag approval template says that it reroutes expenses to specific approvers stated on a tag. And this one really suits our use case perfectly, because a tag then would become the project. All the different projects would have its specific tag, and then it would get rerouted to those specific approvers. So what we do, we select the template we want to start with, and then we go ahead and say apply. And this brings us to a fully formed, ready to go workflow. So this is really great. You can see, I know when it first comes up, it looks like a lot. It really seems like quite complicated. But if we go through it step by step, you'll see it's really intuitive and actually really simple to follow. What's great about these as well is if it meets your use case already, you don't have to make edits, but it's also really great and easy to make these edits. So the power is really in your hands. The first thing to highlight is what makes it so easy to follow is if you hover over any of the lines, it actually highlights them so that you can see exactly which node is getting connected to which. Let's now orientate ourselves with this specific workflow and how it works, what everything means. If we have a look at all of these bubbles, they are what we call nodes, and we have different kinds of nodes depending on what is the action that we want to do. If we have a look at this workflow, the first thing to notice is we have status nodes, and these status nodes are all of these over here that have the rounder bubble, and they essentially are the status of where the expense is within the process. So if we look here, what happens? We start the invoice, the process, the user submits an expense, and it goes to a draft status. You can see, this is an action line. What happens is that the user will submit this expense. And if they submit this expense, then what happens is it gets assigned a tag approver. And that tag approver can have many different properties. We could have the fact that the tag approver is just one approver that is selected within the tag, or that it has many different approvers within that one tag and whoever just approves it first. Then we have the actual approval, the approval node. And the difference between these two, on face value, they seem like they could mean the same thing. Assign approver, final approver. But really what the crux is is that the assign tag approver is assigning the correct user that needs to approve so that it gets routed into their approval inbox. And then the final approver is the actual action of that person approving, right? So then they are the approval and they are approving that particular expense so that it can move on to the next status. And if we continue with the happy flow, you can see once the person approves it, it can go into finance review. So then we over here in finance review for finance to be able to review the expense in question. And if everything is good, everything is in line with company policy, the finance people will review it and it goes to ready for export. On the other hand, though, as we know, it doesn't always take the perfect happy flow, but there is the opportunity for the approver to reject the invoice. So if you hover over this line, you see that it's getting rejected. And it's also could happen that the person wants to recall the invoice. So they submitted the invoice, but they actually noticed that there's an error on the invoice and they want to bring it back into draft status so that they can make the necessary drafts. They can do that. And finally, what you can see as well over here, if you hover on this action line, is that it may be that when the approver gets the invoice, they notice that there's something wrong on the invoice and they send it to needs revision, essentially instructing the submitter to please change something and resubmit. So that's in a nutshell how to read it, how to see exactly what's happening in this approval flow. What we're going to do now is kind of focus on the different capabilities of the workflow designer and how you yourself can quickly make edits to have it be, you can change your approval flow and you can change it really in two ways. You can change it that you want to streamline it and automate it more, or you could potentially change it that you want to have extra additional compliance and you want to have this additional compliance by adding additional complexities to the workflow. If we come and have a look, the main really function of being able to add these specific conditions in order to reroute it is using what we call a condition node. So if we have a quick look at the different kinds of condition nodes, we have really many different condition nodes. And what's really great about the Workflow Designer is you can hover over each of the different nodes, and then it will give us a little pop-up. And that pop-up then gives you a very quick summary on what it actually does. So that's really great. And you can also just refer back to the Help Center article if you need a little bit of additional information on each node. But if we just have a quick look at the different capabilities here, we have this true-false condition node, which means that you can check certain details on the expense. You can check any of the fields that are on the expense. And then based on those, depending if that condition is met, you can route it into a different direction. A really nice one is the amount validation, which can be on category, expense, or trip level. And essentially, this gives you the flexibility to add additional automation. So you could have it that if expenses are under 100 euros, it gets routed directly into in review and it doesn't actually need an approval. Or you could have it that after approval, it doesn't need review and it goes straight to ready to export. Or on the other hand, you could have it that if an expense exceeds a certain amount that you would like extra compliance. So if you had to think about an expense exceeding a really large amount that you would want to make sure it gets an additional approval, you can also do that with that. And what's also a really nice one in terms of adding this additional automation to your company is paid with company card. So within the expense module and when you utilize pay, there are already a lot of different checks that you can do when your employer pays with company card, and you can have confidence that you need to do less really manual intervention. So what is a really nice one to do is to utilize this node and have this be a check if the expense is paid with company card or if it was privately paid, and then depending on that, route it into a different direction. So in this case, I'm going to show you how you would do that. And it's really easy. You just basically hover on, drag it, and then drop the specific node into more or less the whiteboard where you want it to fit in. And in this case, we want to add this additional automation to our company where if it was paid with company card, there is no need for finance to review it. We save that step for the finance team, less work for them. We just send these expenses straight into ready for export. So if we have a look here, that means we see final approval, and you can see this line sends the workflow designer the next step of into review. And this is where we want to make the change. So the first thing you do is you click on this little line, and it's really intuitive. You just delete it, use the delete button. And then what you want to do is relink this one to paid with company card. So now you can see after the final approval has been submitted, it goes to do this check. And what we've said is if it is paid with company card, we don't want it to go into review at all. We want it to go straight for ready to export. And so therefore, we take this and we drag over there and we drop, and then you can also just verify that it's to the right one. So essentially it's doing a check, paid with company card, true. It's going to go ready for export immediately. However, on the other hand, if it was privately paid expense, we do want finance to have to review it. And therefore we click into there and we say in review. What's also really nice about the Workflow Designer is that you can check that you have done everything correctly. Let's say you're working on it, you've made some changes, and now you just want to make sure there's nothing missing, that everything is as it should be. You can say check workflow, and it will tell you no errors detected. So that gives you peace of mind that you're on the right track, that you don't need to make any adjustments. However, if we were to delete a line and now we say check workflow, you can see it's telling us that there is some issues, and you can see over here now these have been highlighted in black, right, where the issues are, and that it's red, like the entire thing is red, and now these little things are black. So you can come here and you can see exactly what is wrong. So it's telling you add missing node, exit, or select the correct path of action. So you can immediately see that there's something missing here. There's a line that should be there, And you know now that you need to select the correct course of action in order to correct this. So what we would do then is just again come and select the correct action. And then if we say check workflow again, now it corrects it. It says there's no errors. We're free to move on. We can just have a quick look at the different kinds of activity nodes that are also available to us, because activity nodes is really the ability to assign specific approvers in your flow. And it also gives you just that little bit of additional level of customization. One that's really nice within the context of a tag approver, in this case, it will be a project, is that we have two options, right? We could have it that you want to have assign all of the tag approvers, have everyone approve, or we could have it that we just want the first person who picks up the expense to approve. So then we're also able to do that, which is really helpful. And one that's also really nice, if compliance is really important to your company, you want to ensure that everything is really compliant, and you utilize a cost object, then you can also say that you want to assign the cost object's line manager. So you can assign, when there's an approval flow, you can assign the cost object owner's line manager to approve that expense. Great. So I think that gives you a little bit of insights on what's available and how to use it. As we said, there's many condition nodes. There's so many options with the workflow designer. We have a workflow library that really explores all of them and lets you have play around and see what you can do. Before we go ahead and publish this, just to go through a few things that are available, you can rename the workflow. So yeah, you can say it's project-based workflow. That was what we had originally named it. But now we have also added that credit card skip skip review. And we can then rename it that so that it's really clear to anyone who sees it in the list what the approval flow is relating to. So we can save that. And then you can also download it if you wanted to save it in a specific place so that you could upload it later. But it's all saved right here within your whiteboard, so you don't necessarily need to do that. But you can then go ahead and publish it. One thing to notice is it will always give you this confirmation pop-up so that you can confirm if you want to publish workflow. Once it's published, you can't make edits to a workflow. You would have to then duplicate it and then make the edits, but I will show you now, which is also why the naming is also very important. So let's say we confirm. And then you can see over here, we have the project-based approval flow over here within the list. We can edit it. So if you see here, you can rename the workflow, but you cannot edit it. If you wanted to edit it, let's say in this case, you notice that actually within your company, you have really great confidence with your company cards, and you want to make further automatizations, then you could say you wanted to come and move this, that if it's paid with company card, it actually doesn't need approval either, that it can go straight into ready to export. Then you would come here and you could say duplicate to edit, and it will give you a copy of this exact workflow. You can duplicate it, and then you can basically play around with it and make whatever edits you wanted to in this case, and then you could republish it. Just to show you over here, if you don't publish it and you just save it, you can save, you can go back, and then it saves it as a draft, so you can come back later and make the changes that you want. Perfect. So I think that gives you a really great introduction to the workflow designer and how to actually design a workflow. But the next step is to ensure that you assign the workflow that you just created to the correct company. And how you do that is you come over here to company settings, and you would then come and select the correct company, because that's also the beauty of the workflow designer, is that you can have each company within your organization can have its own specific custom workflow, or you can have the same one on multiple companies, but you really have that flexibility. You come over here and you will see that there's this toggle that says enable custom workflow. You select the toggle and then you choose which one you would want it to be. So then we say we want the project-based, but it skips the credit card skip review, approval flow, and we can then save it and it will assign the new custom workflow. One thing to just note here is that it will only be on, all of your expenses that now get submitted will have the new workflow, but any expenses that were already in the system that were in a different stage will follow the workflow that was selected at their submission. So just one thing to bear in mind when you are making changes to your workflow designer. And now, let's say you've been playing around with the workflow designer, you have some questions, maybe you have a bit of a complicated use case that you want to explore further and see if you can create this workflow designer for your company, but you need a little bit more expertise and best practice advice. We have enabled our partner ecosystem to be able to give you that service, to deliver that service if you feel that you would like that a little bit of additional consultation. If that's the case, you would come here to this question mark. You would say contact support. You would choose service request. You would say you want a service request for a workflow. And you would say you want to set up a new approval workflow or you want to change an existing workflow. So then you would select this one. You can also select if something isn't working with your current approval, and that would then get routed to technical support. And then over here, it will give you all of our partners that are enabled to help you with the workflow designer. You can book a meeting with them directly. You would explain your specific use case, and then they would assist you with enabling you further with the workflow designer, as well as creating the workflow that meets your company's needs. So that is the workflow designer in a nutshell. Thank you so much for joining the demo. We really invite you at this point to have a look at the workflow designer, to come and have an explore the resources that are available to you in the Help Center article. The power is really in your hands. You also have access to your test account. So if you want to do some tests without fear that you're going to disrupt anything in your production environment, then go ahead, have a play around, see what you can do, read about it. And if you have any questions, then we're also here to support you on your journey with the workflow designer. So I think you really see what are the benefits of the workflow designer, how the workflow designer works in action. But just to sum it up is, why did we really focus on creating this product enhancement for our customers? It's because we really wanted to ensure that you could have some flexible in-team customizations. We understand that teams grow quickly, companies grow quickly, things change, and we want to enable you to be able to change things on demand in order to scale and to keep up with those demands. We also wanted to make sure that you can comply with all of your compliancy needs and ensure that you can maintain robust governance. We wanted to have this customer-centric delivery. So you are in control, the power is in your hands, and you can ensure a rapid go live to any of the changes that you want within your company's workflow. And lastly, we've also focused, as I said, on ensuring we have that strong partner ecosystem for when you do need that additional support, when you have some additional questions and you want to be able to create a service consultation, you can rely on our partner ecosystem. Thank you so much for joining our webinar. It was really great to be able to take you through the benefits of the workflow designer, why we created it, and to take you through a demo on how the workflow designer works in practice. We're sure that you're itching now to go and have a play around within the workflow designer and see all of the amazing capabilities that are at your fingertips. Thank you and have fun exploring Yokoy.